This universal egg, or the universe in the shape of an egg, is called the manifestation of material energy. Its layers of water, air, fire, sky, ego, and mahatattva increase in thickness one after another. Each layer is 10 times bigger than the previous one, and the final outside layer is covered by pradhana. Within this egg is the universal form of Lord Hari, of whose body the 14 planetary systems are parts. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. This universe, or the universal sky which we can visualize with its innumerable planets, is shaped just like an egg. As an egg is covered by a shell, the universe is also covered by various layers. The first layer is water, the next is fire, then air, then sky, and the ultimate holding crust is pradhana. Within this egg-like universe is the universal form of the Lord, as the Virat Purusha. All the different planetary situations are parts of his body. This is already explained in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, 2nd canto. The planetary systems are considered to form different bodily parts of that universal form of the Lord. Persons who cannot directly engage in the worship of the transcendental form of the Lord are advised to think of and worship this universal form. The lowest planetary system, Patala, is considered to be the soul of the Supreme Lord, and the earth is considered to be the belly of the Lord. Brahmaloka, or the highest planetary system where Brahma lives, is considered to be the head of the Lord. This Virat Purusha is considered an incarnation of the Lord. The original form of the Lord is Krishna, as confirmed in the Brahma Samhita, Adi Purusha. The Virat Purusha is also Purusha, but he is not Adi Purusha. The Adi Purusha is Krishna, Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Anadir Adir Govinda. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is also accepted as the Adi Purusha, the original. Krishna says, "No one is greater than I." There are innumerable expansions of the Lord, and all of them are Purushas, or enjoyers. But neither the Virat Purusha nor the Purusha avatars, Karanadakashai Vishnu, Garbhodakashai Vishnu, and Kshirodakashai Vishnu, nor any of the many other expansions is the original. In each universe, there are Garbhodakashai Vishnu, the Virat Purusha, and Kshirodakashai Vishnu. The active manifestation of the Virat Purusha is described here. Persons who are in the lower grade of understanding regarding the Supreme Personality of Godhead may think of the universal form of the Lord, for that is advised in the Bhagavatam. The dimensions of the universe are estimated here. The outer covering is made of layers of water, air, fire, sky, ego, and mahatattva, and each layer is 10 times greater than the one previous. The space within the hollow of the universe cannot be measured by any human scientist or anyone else, and beyond the hollow there are 7 coverings, each one 10 times greater than the one preceding it. The layer of water is 10 times greater than the diameter of the universe, and the layer of fire is 10 times greater than that of water. Similarly, the layer of air is 10 times greater than that of fire. These dimensions are all inconceivable to the tiny brain of a human being. It is also stated that this description is of only one egg-like universe. There are innumerable universes besides this one, and some of them are many, many times greater. It is considered, in fact, that this universe is the smallest. Therefore, the predominating superintendent, or Brahma, has only 4 heads for management. In other universes, which are far greater than this one, Brahma has more heads. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is stated that all these Brahmas were called one day by Lord Krishna on the inquiry of the small Brahma, who, after seeing all the larger Brahmas, was thunderstruck. That is the inconceivable potency of the Lord. No one can measure the length and breadth of God by speculation or by false identification with God. These attempts are symptoms of lunacy. So, this is a description of the expansion of the material universe. This verse describes two features of the universe. There's the inside region, in which there are 14 planetary systems, and these are said to constitute the universal form of the Lord, and they're compared with a universal body. Beyond the 14 planetary systems, there are the coverings of the universe, and this verse describes these coverings. Basically, the coverings of the universe represent different manifestations of the material elements. And so the coverings of the universe are related to the description of the material elements in the Sankhya philosophy. So in this verse, curiously enough, it is said that the coverings of the universe begin with water. At least that's indicated by one statement here in the verse, Toya Adi B, by water and so on. So in other places in the Bhagavatam, it's described that the coverings begin with earth. So there's some ambiguity there. In any case, the basic principle is that as you go out from the universe, going outwards, the successive coverings are of successively more subtle elements. It is described that the elements begin with Krishna's material energy, which is called pradhan. From pradhan, a transformation takes place, and mahatattva is produced. From mahatattva, by a further transformation, there's the production of false ego, which is actually a kind of substance. The false ego is named false ego or ahankara because it puts the living entity into the illusion of being the material body. But from this false ego, there are further transformations. In particular, the element of ether or space is generated from the ahankara element. From ether, there's a further transformation, and air is developed. From that, you have fire, and from that you have water, and then finally earth. So, going outwards, the elements constituting the shells of the universe are these elements in reverse, namely earth, water, fire, air, ether, and then false ego and mahatattva. In some places, so that makes 7 coverings. In some places it is described that there are 8, and pradhan is indicated as an 8th covering. In the Brihat Bhagavatamritam that is stated. But here, it's also said the final outside layer is pradhan. Or else you could say that all of the layers are enveloped by pradhan. So, this would seem to indicate that when mahatattva is produced, it is produced in the form of small globules. It is described that there are, of course, this description of the coverings applies to one universe, and it is described that there are many universes, each of which has similar coverings. And these are said to be, clustered together like bubbles of foam in ocean water. So there's the expanse of the causal ocean, and within this causal ocean there are innumerable universes emanating from the pores in the body of Mahavishnu, and these are compared to little bubbles of foam. So that is the basic description. there's a interesting statement that Srila Prabhupada makes in one purport, which I thought I would read, concerning the development of the elements. Yeah, this was stated by Sridhar Swami. Srila Sridhar Swami confirms that a part of the material nature, after being initiated by the Lord, is known as the Mahat Tattva. A fractional portion of the Mahat Tattva is called false ego. A portion of the ego is the vibration of sound, and a portion of sound is atmospheric air. A portion of the airy atmosphere is turned into forms, and the forms constitute the power of electricity or heat. Heat produces the smell of the aroma of earth, and the gross earth is produced by such aroma. All these combined together constitute the cosmic phenomenon, and so forth. Then he says the extent of the cosmic phenomenon is calculated to be diametrically 4 billion miles. Then the coverings of the universe begin, and so forth. The interesting thing about this description is that instead of saying that the successive layers of elements are in the form of concentric shells, you have successive spheres of elements. And this makes sense if you consider that each successive element which is developed is a transformation of the preceding one, and it is therefore included within the category of the preceding element. So what you have is for example, shell of ether, and within ether, a small part of that, namely a 10th part, is converted into air, and there's also still ether there, of course, and within that shell or spherical region of air, then a 10th part is converted into forms corresponding to the fire element, and within a 10th part of that you have water, and within a 10th part of that you have earth. So it's as though you had a process of successive condensation of one element from the other, and this condensation occurs always within a 10th part of the larger region of the preceding element. An interesting statement made in this description is that he says, a portion of the airy atmosphere is turned into forms, and the forms constitute the power of electricity or heat. So Srila Prabhupada associates electricity with the fire element, which in the Sankhya philosophy is connected with form. And it's interesting that in modern science you have electricity and light being linked together as one basic kind of thing, namely electromagnetism. So the sort of meeting point between modern scientific ideas and this description would be in this element of fire, or radiation, which is also involved with electricity. It's also interesting that as far as modern science is concerned, form ultimately is based on the atom, since atoms combine to form molecules, and molecules form larger structures. And the atom is basically an electromagnetic object, according to modern science. It's basically electricity flowing around the nucleus, and that creates a definite form. So this is a meeting point between science and the Vedic description. Now, concerning the size of the universe, one problem that comes up occasionally is that it is said in the Bhagavatam that the universe is basically 4 billion miles in diameter. This is using 8 miles per yojana. The actual description in the Bhagavatam being that the diameter of the universe is 50 koti yojanas, where koti is 10 million. So that would be 500 million yojanas, which multiplied by 8 gives you 4 billion miles. And then the coverings of the universe begin after that. Now this 4 billion miles is rather small for the total size of the universe. It's interesting that within that extent of 4 billion miles, everything lines up very nicely with the planetary systems, which is something that I described previously. The different orbits of the planets line up very nicely with the dimensions of the different dweepas and so forth in Jambudweep. But then the description cuts off at a radius of 2 billion miles. But there are further indications that the size of the universe could be quite a bit larger. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's an interesting purport. There's a verse which says, Krishna said, your particular universe extends 4 billion miles, therefore it is the smallest of all the universes. Consequently, you have only 4 heads. This is what Srila Prabhupada was referring to in the purport when he mentioned that the Brahma in this universe has only 4 heads. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, one of the greatest astrologers of his time, gives information from Siddhanta Shiromani that this universe measures a certain number of miles. This number has, let's see, it has 17 digits. So I won't even try to read this number. Actually, it's easiest to read it using the scientific method. It's about 1.87 times 10 to the 17th power. So a billion is 10 to the 9th power. And that means a billion would be 10 to the 9 plus 9, which would be 10 to the 18th power. So this is just, now this is multiplied by 8 to give you miles. So this means you're getting that the universe measures about a billion miles, which is a little bit bigger than 4 billion. And I always thought it was interesting that the purport of 4 billion is a billion. So, pardon me? What I said is, it always struck me as interesting that the purport of 4 billion, because you see the verse here says the universe extends 4 billion miles. And the purport says, well, it gives a figure of a billion miles, roughly speaking. So, in any case, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati indicated that the universe could be quite a bit larger based on the Siddhanta Shiromani. He goes on to say, this is the circumference of this universe. According to some, this is only half the circumference. Now, if you look up these statements in the Siddhanta Shiromani, in fact, you will find that the reason that 1/2 comes up is that this circumference is given as the circumference of the Loka mountain, which is halfway to the shell of the universe. So that's why the statement is said that this is only half of the circumference. So basically what is being done there is that the Bhumandala structure is being greatly enlarged, according to this particular description. So there is room in the Vedic literature for describing the universe as being very large. In modern science, distances in the universe are given in terms of light years, where a light year is the distance that a beam of light would travel in 1 year, at a speed of 186,000 miles in a second. So if you want to find out how large that is, you can multiply it out. Multiply 186,000 times the number of seconds in a year. So, using that figure, the radius of the universe comes out to about 5,077 light years, according to this statement in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which is respectably large even in modern scientific terms. Now, if you then go on to the coverings of the universe, each one is 10 times as the the size of the preceding one. And if there are 7 coverings, that gives you basically 10 to the 7th power, because you multiply by 10 7 times going out. And so then if the circumference is about 10 to the 18th power, you get the radius, of course, you divide by 2 pi, which is about 6. So let's see, call that 10 to the 17th, plus another 10 to the 7th, gives you about 10 to the 24th power miles going out. And that's quite large, even in modern astronomy, actually. So the idea of the universe being big is also there in the Vedic literature. So those are a few observations. I guess I'll stop there. Are there any questions or comments? Yeah?
I was wondering, is that outside the universe of all ego and so subtle? Somebody like Richard Thompson, what was he manifesting for relation he became angry? Wasn't he able to penetrate and go to the appearance of God?
Well, it's described he was able to go there and speak to Lord Vishnu. So how could he do that if he still lost his temper just because Maharaj Ambarish drank water before feeding him? So that's an interesting question. Of course, Durvasa Muni is a pretty unique personality also. He's a sort of plenary expansion, avatar of Lord Shiva, as I understand. So he exhibits Lord Shiva's characteristics to some extent. But, of course, the 4 Kumaras also were able to go to Vaikuntha, and they weren't liberated yet. Then again, they weren't allowed to pass through the gateways to Vaikuntha, thus resulting in the famous incident of Jai and Vijay. So it appears that great yogis are able to actually travel to Vaikuntha. So, that seems to be the information we have. Yeah?
Well, the size of the universe. If we accept the second 4 billion Bible, the questions would be that is there something within current scientific functioning that would produce a result that would indicate that somehow all of a sudden you're going to have an earth wall, radars bouncing off Earth. Is there anything that, or changes in the laws, like you were explaining in one of your books about your investing so much faith in the Doppler effect? Mm-hmm. So is there any law that might, any way that what they're seeing could be used to indicate that actually there is such a shell?
Well, there is something. I guess I should mention for the kitchen, Burley Vodka wants to know if there's any scientific evidence for a shell surrounding the universe. Something like a brick wall that you would run into. I haven't heard that any of the space probes ran into one. But in any case, an interesting point was made there concerning the laws of nature. A fundamental assumption of modern astronomy is that the laws of physics that are observed in the laboratory are the same throughout the universe. Now that's an assumption because no one has gone out there to check. And it's a very important assumption because basically what astronomers are working with is radiation coming down from the sky. You look at the radiation coming down from the sky and then you ask yourself, well, what could have made that radiation? And to do that, you have to know what laws govern the radiation when it's out there in space. So that means you have to assume that the laws you know apply everywhere in space. So that assumption is made. Now, no one has proven that, because that's an assumption you have to make before you can even start, as far as astronomy is concerned. So that shows the limitation of the scientific method. By the way, this is the basic principle of uniformitarianism, to use another name for it. That's the name applied in geology, where you assume that all the features in the Earth can be explained on the basis of processes of geology that we see today, such as erosion by water and so forth. So in any case, the possibility is still there that the laws may change as you go out, in which case that means that once you enter a region in which the laws are somewhat different from what they are here, you have no way of knowing from the Earth what you're really dealing with. You don't really know how things work beyond the point where the laws we know have jurisdiction. So that's one point. Now, concerning Murli-Vadaka's original question, namely, is there any evidence that could be interpreted as indication of a shell? Well, there's the famous cosmic black body radiation. Now, according to the scientific picture, that is radiation left over from the primordial Big Bang. But one could experiment with another interpretation. Now, that radiation corresponds to a temperature of about 4 degrees Kelvin. Kelvin scale is measured from absolute zero. So that means it's about the temperature of liquid helium or something like that, extremely cold. So you can consider, well, what if the universe is surrounded by an enormous shell which is extremely cold and is giving off radiation as a black body at that temperature? Then you would have the famous cosmic black body radiation coming from the shell of the universe. Now, that's one speculation that I have never heard any scientist make. But actually, what is the source of the famous cosmic black body radiation? We don't really know. All we know is that if you aim a very sensitive radio receiver at the sky in various directions, you pick up this radiation. So it's coming in from all directions. And actually nobody knows where it comes from. So that's, and of course, even if there is evidence for a shell, the evidence has to be interpreted, because evidence by itself actually doesn't say anything. Unless you apply an interpretation, the evidence is mute, you might say. So, yeah?
Yes, there's 2 dimensions here. One measuring the outside diameter of the inside.
Oh, you mean those 2 figures that I was talking about? Well, in one sense, the figures seem to indicate a contradiction, you might say. But I would interpret it to mean that the universe is described, that different descriptions are found in the Vedic literature, which have different domains of applicability. So the description of the structure of Bhumandala out to the shells of the universe, covering 4 billion miles, applies very well to the solar system. Everything fits there very nicely in terms of the sizes of the orbits and the dweepas and so forth. However, there are indications that the stars and galaxies and so on are much further away. Now, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati then states that there's this much bigger figure for the size of the universe. And if you look in the Jyotisha Shastras, such as Siddhanta Shiromani, in fact, you'll find that that bigger figure is there. So I would take that as indicating that there are different descriptions that apply to different scales within the universe. There are some further points I could also make about that. Within the context of the description of Bhumandala itself, it can be argued that Bhumandala is used to describe at least 2 or 3 different aspects of the solar system and the Earth. So, as far as I can see, the easiest way to reconcile these descriptions is that Bhumandala and the shells of the universe and so on are being used in different ways to describe different aspects of the universe. In any case, the 2 different dimensions are given. In this case, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita commentary by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. So, yeah? Oh, the question is ether something or is it nothing? Well, it's something. Basically, space is also something. Nothing wouldn't even have dimension. After all, we speak of space as 3-dimensional. Well, unless it's something, how can it be 3-dimensional? After all, it could possibly be 2-dimensional. Or, let's say, 6-dimensional. But we experience it as 3-dimensional. So it's an actual entity with definite characteristics. So space is actually something. Ahankara is more subtle. So that's a more subtle something. So, actually, in one sense, space is more substantial than solid matter, like this microphone stand. That's especially true if you consider the meaning of the word substantial, because sub-stand means to stand underneath or to be the support of. And actually, ether is the basis of the other elements, including earth. So it stands beneath them. Of course, substantial or substance means something that supports something else. So in that case, since false ego is the source of ether, then false ego is even more substantial than ether. So the ultimate substance would then be pure spirit then. So, okay. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.